Hello, my name is Jared Stone, and I am a senior technical curriculum developer here at Jitterbit. Today, we're going to dive into a tutorial that is part of our Jitterbit Basics series that shows you how to quickly connect to your data systems using the Jitterbit Harmony platform. Now, in this tutorial, I'm going to use the Jitterbit Harmony Cloud Studio to show you how to quickly configure the NetSuite connector and create a very basic operation using that connection. Okay, so we're going to start by creating a new project. So we'll click the New Project button on the right-hand side. And now we need to name this project. In this case, I'm just going to name it NetSuite to FTP because that's what I'm going to be doing in my case, tutorial. Next, we select an environment. And then the final option here, which is optional, is to add a description. So this allows you to add some more context around what's going on within the project, which can be very helpful to not only yourself if you're that sole Jitterbit administrator, but also if you're working in a team environment. It's going to allow others within the team to get a really quick glimpse as to what's within that project by having a good informative description there. So I'll click Start Designing. So now I'm taken into the designing area here, okay? So over on the right-hand side, the component palette is where we want to start to make this NetSuite connection. So you can cycle through these manually, scrolling through and trying to find them, but you can also use this filter option, which is very helpful. So we're going to click that NetSuite button there, and you can see here on screen we have the configuration information that comes up. So this is where you're going to input your NetSuite specific information, account information, to make this connection. Okay, so once you have all of your information input, let's go ahead and test this connection. A couple of things that you do notice here on the right hand side of all of these little text boxes, there is a V that's encased within a square, which just means that you can variabilize these areas, creating project variables and reference to them in places like this. But you can see here on my screen, successful connection has been made. So I'll go ahead and click Save Changes. And now that I have defined that NetSuite endpoint, notice that I have a bunch of different options here. So we have search, create, update, get list, upsert, delete. So what we're going to be doing here in this particular case is we're going to be doing a NetSuite search. Okay, so what I want to do is get some customer data from my NetSuite instance and essentially just move that over to my FTP as JSON. Okay, so I might can name this something like search customer. Okay, I can also name this operation at this point as well. So I'm going to do something kind of vague here, but like I mentioned, you'd want to use your organization's best practices and be informative in description when you are working in some sort of production scenario. So I'll just say NetSuite to FTP for the name here. Okay. So now let's drill into this and define the activity. So just a moment ago we defined the endpoint, but now we are on to the activity itself. Okay, so we can change that name here if we wanted to. Like I mentioned, I'm looking for the customer object, which can be found manually just by scrolling like this. You can also come here and just start to type customer, and you can see all of this data here will basically be filtered down for us and allow us to select that customer object. All right, so we have a few different search types here on screen. I'm going to stick with basic, so I'll click next. Okay, so here on this screen, this is where you could add a condition if you would like. So you can expand that customer object there and see all of the information within. No condition here, so I'm just going to click next at the bottom. And here we can see the data schema. All right, so we see the response here on the right hand side. We'll click finished. All right, so now we have defined that activity. So the next thing that I'll do is move into the transformation. So to do that, I'll take my cursor and just hover just to the right of that activity that I just defined, and then you see the plus icon that comes up. Once I click, I can then add a new script or transformation. So I'm doing the transformation, so let's go ahead and do that. The first thing I'll do is start by giving a good descriptive name here. So we're going to say NetSuite to FTP. Like I mentioned on the left-hand side, this is that customer object coming from NetSuite, so we need to now define the target. You can see on the right-hand side, no target has been specified at this point. Remember, we're wanting to connect to that customer object, take that data or some of the data from that specific object and move it over to our FTP as JSON. All right, so to do that, we're going to click the Define Schema option. You'll see a drop-down that comes up. We'll use Sample File, and we're going to select the option to provide new schema. So let's just say something like JSON schema, okay? So you can see that you have a few different options here. You can load URL, upload a file. In this case, I'm just going to paste in a JSON sample file into this text box here. So once I have that in, you see that the schema is valid, which is important, so that's good to know. We'll save that. And once we save that, we're going to see the structure over here on the right-hand side that's being created from the information, the sample information that we just put in. So that's perfect. We'll click Finish. And we're back to the transformation. Okay, so now what we need to do is manually map our fields from the source to the target side. Okay, so we'll do that really quickly. Okay, so I was able to manually map over all of my fields from the source to the target side. If you are to look for something specifically, you can see this gray line there that kind of points us back to the area where we have mapped from. Okay, company name over here to company. Nice little indicator. If you did need to maybe remap something, you could always go over here and delete that mapping and then remap accordingly. At the top area of this page, you can also preview, which is basically just loading in some of that data and making sure that everything is correct as far as the mappings go. As you know, sometimes working with these fields, sometimes the names are not uh, super intuitive. They can be slightly ambiguous. So that comes in handy just to make sure that you're mapping the correct data from source to target side. In this case, I think everything is correct, so I'll go ahead and return to the workflow by clicking that orange button in the upper right hand corner. So now what I'm going to do is define my target. Like I mentioned, I'm sending this over to my FTP. So over on the component palette side, I'll just filter this out and start to create this endpoint. So it gives me the name FTP endpoint. I'm fine with that. Let's put my training host information here. And then username and password. And then we'll just test this connection. And there we have a successful connection. So now that that endpoint has been defined, I can now define the activity. You notice here for the FTP endpoint, I have the option to read and write. This is a target, so we'll be writing that data. And let's go ahead and dive into this. All right, so it gives us the name write. Let's just say write JSON here. The path I'll leave blank. And for the file's name area, let's put output underscore square bracket, and we're going to leverage some global variables, date underscore square bracket, and then time. And let's put the file extension .json. And then we'll uncheck the reuse FTP rename option. Click next, and then click finish. All right, and just that quickly, we have made the connection to NetSuite and then built this operation here. So let's go ahead and deploy and run this. We're just sending this data to the cloud, and then it's executing the operation for us. We can also pull up our Cloud Studio logs here, and we see that that was a success. So now I can go over to my FTP and log in. And you can see my result right here. And there's my data in JSON fashion right there. So that completes the tutorial on how to connect to the NetSuite connector using the Jitterbit Harmony Cloud Studio platform. For deeper training opportunities, please check out our learning platform, Jitterbit University. You can access this at university.jitterbit.com. You will need an enrollment key to access the training content, and to get this information, you'll need to reach out to either your customer success or alliance manager.